Greetings. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another episode of Walk Magick. So today, I want to take a look at Libri E and O, summarize their content, and explain why they are, in my opinion, the best places to start in Thelemic practice. But I also want to go over some ideas of what comes next after you finish these two foundational texts. In my experience, a lot of people just starting with Thelema, they tend to get overwhelmed by the amount of literature Crowley produced, not to mention all of the other authors and books that he recommends, and it's just easy to get lost, overwhelmed, not know where to start, and because of that, a lot of people give up before they even start. So these two texts, Libri and Liber, are the best places. When Crowley was writing the Equinox Volume 1 and other books, I'm certain he held the notion that practitioners who were buying his books were going to join AA, and thus would get an instructor and task lists, which organized exactly what to read and what to practice, in what order, at what time. But today, it's my general feeling that with thousands of people interested in Thelema, and only a handful of them ever intending to join AA, and even less of a handful actually do, that's not the reality. So for most, having a teacher is not what they're going to ever do. And now that all of his literature and most books of the occult in general are published right online for free, many people are making attempts at practicing Thelema solitarily. This leaves it up to them to read the books and pick their practices on their own. So it's just very easy to get lost. So Libri and Liber are the best places, again, to start. Also, Liber E is more mystically inclined. Liber O is more magically inclined. I highly recommend getting the Big Blue Magic Book 4. I have videos on the first 3 parts of that book, all of the practical stuff that you need to know. You definitely want to go through the Equinox as well as Magic Book 4. Those are probably the best 2 places to start reading, as I'll talk more about later. But the first part of Magic Book 4 is all about yogic stuff, asana, pranayama, dharana, the things you're going to do in Liber E starting off. And it has the magical tools in section 2, and then part 3 has all of the theories that you really need to know to start magic. Now, for the record, I highly recommend that you find a teacher, either in an order or somebody who has been practicing for many years, has had a teacher of their own, doesn't matter if it's been in a formal order, but that they have verifiably attained and that somebody oversaw their progress at one point. Not only does it make your process easier, there are just straight up things that a teacher can give you that you cannot get on your own. There's a lot of keys missing to practice rituals in Crowley's work, and we don't always see what we need to change internally. And it becomes the job of one's instructor or teacher to point out our flaws and help us work through them. That said, if you're just starting practice, or even if you've been at it for a while, Liber E and Liber O are foundational texts that you're going to use for the entirety of your practicing Thelema. Asana, pranayama, circle castings, the magician's tables, and the rest are things that you are going to need to know how to use in every single ritual or meditation that you perform. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to summarize each section of both of these texts quickly and explain what's going on in them and how to get the most out of it. Keep in mind, this is not full breakdowns of each section, just spark notes to help you out. Also, I have videos on this channel about a lot of this already, so check the description for links to those videos or just scroll through my channel, either playlist or video section. Section 1 of Liber E is on how to keep a magical record. This is an everyday practice for the rest of your life, the whole time you're practicing Thelema. You need to record every ritual and meditation in the fullest of detail. Write in it like a scientist, trying to discover a new medicine, for example, as if it's not just meant for you, but that your magical record is being written to help the entire world. Writing in this manner will allow you to detail everything perfectly, outlining what you are doing, what your results are, and all of the conditions surrounding whatever you're doing. One day, your results may just help someone else. Plus, as a magician, you are going to go through dry spells, even times where you doubt your faith in the great work or magic. It's at these times, looking back at your record should give you the confidence to persevere, especially the entries where your magic produced some great wonders. It's a revitalizing medicine for the soul to keep a magical record and to go back through it. Section 2 is super cool, and I talk in Magic in Theory and Practice, Chapter 18, Clairvoyance and the Body of Light, all about this. You're trying to guess tarot cards by looking at the back of each card, one at a time, in the deck. This practice attunes your mind to the feelings of the elementary components of each card, and in turn, helps when astral traveling or performing invocations. Once you know how the elements, planets, and zodiac all feel, you will have a much easier time identifying them later on. This practice also helps build up your psychic abilities, even leading to the power of foresight. When you can see through your mind's eye, rather than just through your five senses, a world hidden from most suddenly becomes accessible. Sections 3, 4, and 5 are asana, pranayama, and dharana. These are the building blocks of yoga and are absolutely vital to practicing Thelema successfully. Asana, stillness of body, disciplines your body. Prana disciplines your breathing into regularity and control. And dharana breeds control over your mind and imagination. In each of these, you work toward doing them for 1 hour without any mistakes, or what you'd call a break, where you have to move or mess up or the image in your mind falters. The discipline that this gives you allows you to function militantly. It's hard work, but it's just as rewarding. In Liber, the outcome of these practices is summarized in verse 17, quote, "Fixed thought is a means to an end. Therefore pay attention to the power of silent thought and meditation. The material act is but the outward expression of thy thought, and therefore it hath been said that, quote, the thought of foolishness is sin," end quote. Thought is the commencement of action, and if chance thought can produce much effect, what cannot fixed thought do? End quote. Section 6 of Libri is physical limitations. Super important, and a lot of people just kind of gloss over this. Part of practicing Thelema is introspection and self-knowledge. To know your true will, you must first know yourself completely. How can you do that without knowing what you can and cannot do? Not to mention, in at least my belief, practicing Thelema, doing your will, becomes much easier when you are functioning with peak bodily, mental, and spiritual proficiency. You want the best possible health in each of these categories. You get this by exercising the body through physical means, exercising the brain and mind through study and deep thought, and the spirit through exposure to more and more powerful forces over the years. But, in order to get the most out of any exercise, you must first know what your limits are in numerous fields of exercise. What the line or the boundary of what you can do looks like, and then how to push that bar further and further so that you are constantly growing and getting the absolute most out of what you're doing without hurting yourself. Plus, if you ever find yourself in any kind of dangerous situation, it may literally save your life if you know exactly what you can and cannot do, and for how long you can maintain that. Lastly, Section 7 is a course of reading for the newcomer. I have a full summary of all these books in a video, check the description. These books will familiarize you with many of the subjects you're going to need to know in order to build upon and communicate with others about, especially if you get a superior who is guiding you. Again, I have videos on all of these subjects, from the Yoga, Book 4 videos, and Magic in Theory and Practice. And like I said, even the book list of Section 7. So check out those videos if you haven't. Now, Libri is more mystical, or inward journey type of a text, with meditations and self-knowledge at the forefront. Liber O is more magic-based. It works with ritual magic and things that help study the nature of the universe that is around you, though within at times. Section 1 gives warning and instruction about using the text. Namely, that while doing magic, it is dangerous for the newcomer to think everything that they see or imagine during a ritual has some objective reality, and that gods are literally talking directly to them. In fact, the text writes explicitly, quote, "This book is very easy to misunderstand. Readers are asked to use the most minute critical care in the study of it, even as we have done in its preparation. In this book it is spoken of the Sephiroth and the paths, of spirits and conjurations, of gods, spheres, planes, and many other things, which may or may not exist. It is immaterial whether these exist or not. By doing certain things, certain results will follow. Students are most earnestly warned against attributing objective reality or philosophic validity to any of them. Before entering upon any of these practices, the student should be in good health and have attained a fair mastery of asana, pranayama, and dharana." Side note, do not skip those. The text says, don't do Liber O if you haven't done the first parts of Liber E. People ignore that all the time, and it's like, you don't get the results you need to if you don't have those first 3 points, asana, pranayama, and dharana, down packed. To continue the quote, "There is little danger that any student, however idle or stupid, will fail to get some result. But there is great danger that he will be led astray, obsessed and overwhelmed by his results, even though it be by those which it is necessary that he should attain. Too often, moreover, he mistaketh the first resting place for the goal, and taketh off his armor, as if he were a victor ere the fight is well begun. It is desirable that the student should never attach to any result the importance which at first it seems to possess." End quote. Why does it say this? My answer is pretty simple. Yes, when you do magic, you are going to experience over the years many cool visions, even auditory and visual hallucinations. The newcomer, suddenly experiencing such things, often runs the risk of thinking that they are special or chosen by God because they can see an angel they have finally been able to invoke. This text is written in such a harsh manner, I believe, to help right-size the ego of the student. Whatever magic you do is first and foremost for your spiritual growth. Doesn't matter to anybody else. First and foremost, it's about you spiritually growing and understanding yourself. Your visions are for you. Nobody is really going to care. That's first off. Maybe something does affect the greater world. Maybe you become a prophet one day. If you're practicing Liber O and Liber E for the first time, you're probably not there. Alright? That's just how it is, you know? It's only after many years and high degrees of attainment that once you have fully gotten an understanding of the great work, yourself, and what you're supposed to be doing with your life, that you are able to find your niche and benefit anyone other than yourself through your actions. If from your first LBRP, when you visualize angels at the quarters, you start believing that they came because you are such a great and powerful magician, you end up doing the exact opposite of what's intended through practicing magic. You do not deflate and right-size your ego, but instead come to be a megalomaniac who believes themselves special, possibly better than others, and it's because of spiritual pride. And that is a bad place to be. So my suggestion, take it or leave it, for your first few years, you're better off thinking about your practices as strictly visual and auditory hallucinations happening inside your head because of the ritual trance state. A time for understanding the objective reality of angels and low spirits, gods, and etc. comes later, but it's not when you're only just beginning to practice Liber O. It's much later on in the future. Section 2 of Liber O deals with the Magician's Tables. If you're new to Thelemic magic, I cannot stress to you enough the value of Hermetic Kabbalah. With it, you can crack open the depths of any holy book, let alone the Thelemic holy books. Without it, you're missing the foundation of Aleister Crowley's magic. He used Kabbalah for almost everything he wrote and practices for, and that he mandates for students. To start, I suggest reading Israel Regardie's A Garden of Pomegranates, followed by the 32 Paths of Wisdom. I think Greer has a version that's pretty good. Or there is another Thelemic version published by Nephilim Press, I forget exactly what it's called, but if you look up Nephilim Press, 32 Paths of Wisdom, it should pop up. It's like something with the serpent. After that, go into 777 and other Kabbalistic writings of Aleister Crowley, as well as 776.5 by James Eshelman, which, in my opinion, is a better collection of the Magician's Tables. Now, these last two books are not books that you're just going to read once and abandon. They're companions for the entirety of your Thelemic grade work and study. You're going to reference them for the rest of your life. And you should work on memorizing their contents completely and then adding to them after you fully understand their contents. You're going to want to add things that are not in them. You're going to want to add new columns, and even in the columns that exist, there are plenty more correspondences that can be added once you know how to use the Magician's Tables. Back to Libro, Section 2, Verse 1, quote, "The student must first obtain a thorough knowledge of Book 777, especially the columns," end quote. In total, Crowley lists 51 columns here. And there's much more in the Magician's Tables, but for somebody just coming to Libra, you're going to want to make either cue cards or some type of printouts or something. I use handwritten cue cards. I like writing. It helps me memorize stuff. And then you're going to want to study those cue cards. I do one path with every column per cue card. So Kether is path 1. I did all of the correspondences for Kether on cue cards. I stapled them together, and for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I every single day, multiple times a day, studied those cue cards until I had them memorized. Then I moved on to path 2, so on and so forth. And every so often I come back to those cue cards to refresh my memory. These tables are basically a bunch of lists that correspond with the 32 paths of the Tree of Life. Technically 34. The last two letters, Shin and Tau, play double. For Shin is spirit and fire. Tau is Saturn and Earth. So there's 34 paths, but 32 on the tree. There's 10 Sephiroth. And Sephiroth means counts, numbers, or spheres. And they describe the 10 emanations of the light's descent into material form. So from spiritual universe into physical universe. Creation. Then there's an additional 22 paths which connect these 10 spheres, and they correspond with the 22 Hebrew letters. Plus, there's 2 more lines. For fire and spirit, Tau is Saturn and Earth. These lists contain symbols that, when properly thought about, describe the whole of the universe. They are not complete in their present state, and like I said, every magician should endeavor to make more lists based on their personal predilections, your personal fields of study, whatever you like. A musician can add musical notes. A chemist can add the table of contents to the correspondences. Each Sephiroth and path has qualities likened to a number and astrological symbol. From these 2 basic hermetic building blocks, one can discern most any other correspondence once one fully understands them. For instance, Kether is the number 1. It corresponds with the unity of the divine light, where everything is one. It describes the universe as nothingness of unity, symbolized by the divine light. Path 5 is Gebora, corresponds with Mars and the number 5. The pentagram has 5 points, and thus the 5 elements are somewhat implied. But Mars being the predominant symbol, you must fully understand the martial, warlike, masculine nature of Mars to get a better understanding of Gebora, which means strength. Now, besides meditating upon the universe and human condition, the Magician's Tables are extremely useful for constructing ritual. If you need a word of power that has a particular energy, there is a column for that. If you need items for an altar, say the representation of an animal's image to emphasize the animal of an Egyptian deity that you're going to work with, there's a column for the animals. In Section 2 of Libro, Crowley describes this use as, quote, "Let us suppose you wish to obtain knowledge of some obscure science. In column 45, line 12, which is Beth, Mercury, you will find knowledge of sciences. By now looking up line 12 and other columns, you will find that the planet corresponding is Mercury. Its number is 8. Its lineal figures, the octagon and octagram. The god who rules that planet is Thoth, or in Hebrew symbolism, Tetragrammaton Adonai and Elohim Zabaoth. Its archangel, Raphael. Its choir angels, Beni Elohim. Its intelligence is Tiriel. Its spirit, Taf Ta the Wrath. Its colors orange, for Mercury is the sphere of the Sephira Hod. Yellow, purple, gray, and indigo rayed with violet. Its magical weapon is the wand or caduceus. Its perfumes, mastic and others. Its sacred plants, vervain and others. Its jewel, the opal or agate. Its sacred animal, the snake, etc., etc. You would then prepare your place of working accordingly. In an orange circle you would draw an 8-pointed star of yellow, at whose points you would place 8 lamps, the sigil of the spirit, which is to be found in Cornelius Agrippa and other books. You would draw on the 4 colors with such other devices as your experience may suggest." End quote. One day I'm going to go more into Kabbalah on this channel and teach newcomers how to use the tables. I've already done numbers. The basic numbers, colors, and shapes video that's on this channel is really good. The magician's tables are basically mnemonics. So you memorize one symbol first, and then when you think of that symbol, all of those other things attached to it suddenly come to mind because you've memorized that one thing and you know what its nature is like. So when you memorize 20 different things, but you put them all under the face of a number, when you think of that number, those 20 things come popping into your mind very easily. So it's mnemonics. It's a proven way to memorize things. The last thing one can do as a beginner practicing Libro is to use the tables in your daily affairs. I forget exactly where Crowley writes this, but I'm going to give a crude example. So, after you commit the tables to memory, you use the symbols as points of meditation in your daily affairs. Notice symbols in the world around you. Crowley says something to the effect that, if you leave your home, you see the fence surrounding your property. Chet, the 8th Hebrew letter, means fence. Look for synchronicities after that. Suppose you then see a slew of other things colored maroon and amber. Well, that day you're noticing more things of the nature of the path 18. Suppose next you stroll through the park and see kids playing with chalk on the ground. You notice they're drawing crabs. Cancer is attributed to Chet. You meet up with a friend. She's wearing a pendant with a very large moonstone. As you two walk, you see a beetle like a scarab. Well, on that particular day, should such a string of correspondences cross your path, you should definitely journal the synchronicity. These things mean little on their own, but if you endeavor to figure out why the universe is communicating to you something about the path of Chet, and if you really understand that letter and its correspondences, you may be pulled in a direction that you need to go if you could understand what's being communicated to you through physical things in the universe. Again, this is a crude example, but I hope it makes a point of using the magician's tables. So, section 3 talks of the assumption of God forms and intonation of words of power. Just do as the text says. It's pretty much a first step towards learning the powers of invocation. To take into one's being deities of any variety. To use your mind to create images on the astral plane through your body of light. Also in section 3 is intoning. And you're making your being united with the word and its energy. Make your intonation rumble your entire body, to your legs if possible. Visualize the word and what it represents in your mind's eye. Feel the energy associated with it in and around you. Section 4 is the pentagram and hexagram rituals. I'm making individual videos on all of these. I already did the lesser, greater, and supreme pentagram rituals. The hexagram 2 rituals will come very soon, so stay tuned. Section 5 speaks about the beginnings of astral travel and rising on the planes. So I spoke of this in a Magic and Theory practice video already. The point is, consciousness exists everywhere, in and around you. It is very possible to shift your consciousness out of your body and move it around anywhere. That's the first step. The second is to begin to expose your astral body to as many different types of energy as possible. By doing this, you increase your endurance to powers beyond what you have. You strengthen your body of light so that it can one day direct more powerful, pure, and even volatile energy. Crowley begins the sixth and final section, quote, "The previous experiment has little value and leads to few results of importance, but is susceptible of a development which merges into a form of dharana, concentration, and as such may lead to the very highest ends. The principal use of the practice in the last chapter is to familiarize the student with every kind of obstacle and every kind of delusion, so that he may be perfect master of every idea that may arise in his brain, to dismiss it, to transmute it, to cause it instantly to obey his will." End quote. Crowley goes on to prescribe a follow-up practice to, in the previous section, you're just basically creating an astral body, shifting your consciousness into it, and then traveling up to the atmosphere, maybe even invoking an entity, talking it to it, maybe even traveling around the earth, and just seeing what you can see as you journey. Very low stakes. You might even think it's imaginary. This is not the time yet to start testing it. It's just the beginning of keeping your mind concentrated upon that act of astral travel. In this follow-up practice, you're going to do the following. Sit in your asana, create the astral representation of yourself, and shift your consciousness into it. Now, rise straight up. Keep going no matter what. Quote, "Instead of stopping, let him continue to rise until fatigue almost overcomes him. If he should find that he has stopped without willing to do so, and that figures appear, let him at all costs rise above them. Yea, though his very life tremble on his lips, let him force his way upward and onward. From there you keep going," end quote. "From there you keep going straight the same way until absolute exhaustion has overtaken you." Quote, "Let him continue in this so long as the breath of life is in him. Whatever threatens, whatever allures, though it were Typhon and all his hosts loosed from the pit and leagued against him, though it were from the very throne of God that a voice issues bidding him stay and be content, let him struggle on, ever on. At last there must come a moment when his whole being is swallowed up in fatigue, overwhelmed by its own inertia. Then let him sink, when no longer he can strive, though his tongue be bitten through with the effort and blood gush from his nostrils, into the blackness of unconsciousness. And then, on coming to himself, let him write down soberly and accurately a record of all that hath occurred, yea, a record of all that hath occurred." End quote. Also, returning to your body, side note, there's many different ways to do it. Crowley writes in section 5, I believe, that when you're out there in the astral, create an image of a fiery chariot pulled by white horses, get on that chariot, let it drive you back to your body, you merge the astral image with your own physical body, shift the consciousness back into your own body's brain and mind, rest for a moment, maybe give the sign of silence, and then slowly start to move physically. Crowley speaks about this last section quite possibly leading to a state of dhyana. Now, I have a full video about dhyana, and basically it's a precursor to samadhi, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. Samadhi is a loss of ego, as oneself unites with the point of meditation, i.e. God or something, and the ego is absorbed into that meditation, and you're in union with something, and you're obliterated. Dhyana is somewhat like that, though it's not a perfect state of samadhi. It may simply feel like a blackout of ecstasy. The conscious mind should take a back seat, and your spirit should begin to take hold of the body and mind. That's the gist of it. Okay, so these are the very two first texts I recommend every Thelemite go through thoroughly and completely. They make up the foundations of everything else that one needs to know and do. But supposing one has dedicated the year to 3 years to completing these two texts, well, where does one go from here? Of course, one should have a teacher, again, who has done the work, guided by another, and they would instruct you what to do. If you're in AA, you also have your tasks grade by grade, so you know what to do. But if you're solitary, what the aspirant needs to work on both magically and personally may not be so obvious. But if you're yet to acquire that formal teaching and you still want to go on to what's next, I recommend the following. For reading, James Eshelman's Magical and Mystical System of AA is a great place to start, as it's going to tell you generally what order of operations you should go through grade by grade, as if you were in AA. So you have the work laid out in good order. For further reading, the AA curriculum is posted as a PDF in the description below. It has literally hundreds of books, both fiction and non-fiction, ranging from holy books, yoga, magic, and even fiction stories that conceal gnosis. The majority of these books recommend other authors and their books, so it should keep you busy for a good long time. That's your beginning of study. What's on the list for practice? What follows here is an abbreviated summary of texts that I intend to go over one by one in the future. With asana training basically complete, you'll be using your asana posture quite often for various other texts. How I picked my asana, I went through several days doing each of the recommended asana positions in Libri, one at a time. So the first day I did the God position, the second day the dragon, the thunderbolt, and the ibis, right? Just one per day, seeing which was more comfortable, how I got the best time in, which one I got the best time, and which one I got the least breaks. And after all of that work, I did the obvious thing. I chose the God position. And you stick with it. Whatever you pick, you stick with. To me, that's the most comfortable one. It's the easiest to sit in. It's uncomfortable after long periods of time, but yeah, it's just better than kneeling on with your feet bent like that in the dragon. So dragon looks cooler, but I find the God position more comfortable. So you're going to be using that a lot, so get comfortable in it. Liber HHH has 3 long meditative operations that you should use over the course of months in your asana, even years. You work with Kundalini, and there's even a practice in there that, if done correctly, should help you conquer the fear of death. With that astral practice of rising straight up, and it could possibly lead to dhyana at the end of Libra O, complete, as well as completion of physical clairvoyance from Libra E. Even before Liber HHH, I highly recommend practicing Liber, I'm going to butcher this, Liber, Batra Kofren O Bukosmakia. Butchered it, I'm sorry. Cosmomachia. In it, you have many practices to do in your asana position, from a practice that concentrates on the magician coming to terms with their true self, where you meditate on each part of the body, imagining that that part is cut off and gone, and then considering, well, if that part of the self is missing, are you still you? And it goes so far as past the physical body, removing one's head. Well, are you still you without your head or your brain, without your emotions? What about without your mind? What are you? And so you consider what you really are at a very spiritual level. There's also a practice, amongst others in this text, that uses astral sight to create, via dharana, images of the entire solar system. This leads one to realize what the universe is in relation to oneself. Now, this requires intense concentration. You have to hold many visuals of each and every planet in proximity to Earth and keep them at the right size. Anyone who's ever tried even simpler forms of dharana can testify the difficulty of such a practice is very hard. Objects held still in the mind always find a way to want to change shape, color, move in the weirdest of ways. If you complete this practice, you should note the increased ability to focus on a single task at hand and be able to execute it way more efficiently. For pranayama, I recommend going to Liber Ru Vel Spiritus after you finish your multiple Liber E pranayama practices. So Liber Ru, it uses pranayama not in a still posture, but as you're walking. You meditate on your breath. You mediate your breath to your footsteps. Not only is the walking of many miles while breathing rhythmically great for your health, but it should lead to heightened control over the prana in your bloodstream. Liber also has a section dedicated to research on pranayama and the writing of long essays about the subject. Then, in addition to the magical diary and introspection, I recommend Mahasatipatthana. It's a Buddhist mindfulness practice, and it's a must. I'll here quote James Eshelman, who's quoting Crowley's Collected Works, Volume 1, page 252 essay. Collected Works, Volume 2, page 252 essay, Science and Buddhism. Quote, "Here is the entire text of the instruction for this meditation from Science and Buddhism. This meditation differs fundamentally from the usual Hindu methods by the fact that the mind is not restrained to the contemplation of a single object, and there is no interference with the natural functions of the body as there is in pranayama. It is essentially an observation practice which later assumes an analytical aspect in regard to the question, what is it that is really observed? The ego idea is resolutely excluded from the start. The breathing, motions of walking, are merely observed and recorded. For instance, one may sit down quietly and say, there is an indrawing of the breath, there is an expiration, etc. Or while walking, there is a raising of the right foot, and so on, just as it happens. The thought is, of course, not quick enough to note all the movements of their subtle causes. For example, we cannot describe the complicated muscle contractions, etc., but this is not necessary. Concentrate on some series of simple movements. When this thorough habit becomes intuitive, so that the thought is really, there is a raising as opposed to I raise, one may begin to analyze. And the second stage is, there is a sensation, vidana, of a raising, etc. Sensations are further classed as pleasant or unpleasant. When this is the true intuitive, instantaneous testimony of consciousness, so that there is a raising, etc., is rejected as a palpable lie, we proceed to sana, which is perception. There is a perception of a pleasant or unpleasant sensation of a raising of the body, or part of the body. When this has become intuitive, why, here's a strange result. The emotions of pain and pleasure have vanished. They are sub-included in the lesser skandha of Vedanta, and sana is free from them. And to him who can live in this third stage, and live so forever, there is no more pain, only an intense interest similar to that which has enabled men of science to watch and note the progress of their own death agony. Think of Socrates. Unfortunately, the living in such a state is conditional on sound mental health, and terminable by disease or death at any moment. Were it not so, the first noble truth would be a lie. The two further stages, sankhara and vinanam, pursue the analysis to its ultimation. There is a consciousness of a tendency to perceive the pleasant or unpleasant sensation of a raising of the right foot, being the final form, and I suppose no psychologist of any standing will quarrel this. Reasoning, in fact, leads us to this analysis. The Buddhist goes further only so far as he may be said to knock down the scaffolding of reasoning processes, and to assimilate the actual truth of the matter. It is the difference between the schoolboy who painfully construes balbus morum edificit, and the Roman who announces that historic fact without a thought of his grammar. I have called this meditation the most famous of the Buddhist meditations, because it is stated by the Buddha himself that if one practices it honestly and intelligently, a result is certain, and he says this of no other practice. To continue with James Eshelman from past, that's Crowley's Collected Works. Now, James Eshelman continues, this is one of the most effective and extraordinary techniques in the entire canon of AA methods. By itself, it allows for the transition of consciousness from one plane to the next. By the act of observing a phenomenon, you actually gain objectivity on the phenomenon, which means you begin to witness from a point of view exterior to it. You kick yourself up a plane from the one you are observing. The layers or planes that emerge successfully in this meditation are the Buddhist skandhas, or characteristic layers. From outermost inwards, these are the nama rupa, literally the name and form of the object itself. Vedana, sensation. Sana, perception. Samskara, tendency, or karma-based habituations. And Vijnanam, consciousness itself. This method of mindfulness will be helpful to us in describing in the next chapter certain practices assigned to the Dominus Liminis. So basically, end quote. So basically what you want to do is you're going to be observing every single thing that you do, and it's a process of I'm lifting this cup with my hand. My fingers are closing around its handle. I am lifting it up to my mouth. 2. The hand is grasping that cup. The arm is being bent, and lips are drinking it. So it becomes less about the eye, and it's a process where you're actually, and then eventually it's just the cup is being lifted. Things are happening, and it becomes more and more impersonal. In addition to this, I also recommend thinking about the thoughts that go through your mind. Very, very intensely. Thinking about every single thought and where it's coming from and where it's leading to the point of obsessive compulsively thinking about every movement of the body and every thought and emotion in the mind. Why are you thinking it? Where is it coming from? Why is that the response that you have to whatever's going on around you? And really focusing on all of those things to the point that it becomes very impersonal. It's not happening to you, it's just happening. And so there's a process. You could read more about this if you look up Mahapati Satthana. There's a lot written about it, and all of those other terms that I've mentioned. Also on the subject of mindfulness, I highly recommend Liber. It has 3 phases. First, removing a word from your vocabulary for about a week or 2. Second, removing a physical action for about a week or 2. And third, not allowing a single thought for a week or 2. Every time you mess up, this text calls for cutting yourself. Now, instead of that, I recommend something along the lines of CBT. Not LOL, like the LGBT gay boys might laugh about those letters, CBT. Which, if you're LGBT, you might know what CBT is. But I'm talking about cognitive behavioral therapy. In Tyson's Magician's Workbook, he recommends this practice, but instead of cutting, you just put a tally mark on a piece of paper as the days go by, and each day you try to improve. And I find this just as fulfilling. I've also heard of CBT snapping a rubber band every time you do something that you don't want to do. So if you're taking a word out of your vocabulary or a letter, say you're not allowed to say the letter S in any word for 2 weeks, you're not allowed to use the letter S. You would just snap a rubber band on your wrist. So you'd wear the rubber band. So you could either do that. I recommend tallying. It's this way you keep track of how many, because you're going to have to write how many times you snapped yourself. And I don't find the act of physical pain any better than just writing it down anyway. But if you do this practice sincerely, you do indeed train your mind, and you do beat it into submission. And Crowley recommends every time your mind is not operating how you need it to, come back to Liber. So you're not going to do it once. You should be doing it 10, 20, 30 times in your life for weeks at a time, depending on which area, whether it's a physical, mental, or verbal thing that you want to take away. Another topic of practice is working with the Thelemite pantheon. So if you've done your circle castings and you've got your magician's tables, now it's time to use that stuff. If you've got all of your magical tools, it's time to use that stuff. So I recommend study of Liber L and the beast's comments thereupon, followed by the Mass of the Phoenix. I have a video about that. And Liber Nu and Liber Had, which I will be making videos. The Mass should be used daily along with Liberesh for solar and true will training. Could even connect you to Rahor Kuit. And then I went through Liber Nu and Liber Had shortly thereafter. So Liber Nu, you're pretending to be Hadit. And you're going to do studies and meditations on every single aspect that Crowley could think of about Nuit from practical and theoretical points. It took me each one, I don't know, 9 months to complete, maybe a little bit longer each one. One of the coolest rituals with Nuit was looking up at the night sky and envisioning her, invoking her. Another one was going upon a place that reminded me of her. So I chose Coney Island. I sat on the boardwalk and I had crafted this long, elaborate ritual, and I performed it astrally while gazing at the ocean. And to me, those things were really beautiful. Liber Had is also just as amazing. So in that you're Nuit, and you're now studying and practicing Hadith. I'm not going to talk too much about them because they're very long texts, but I do intend to go over them one day. Take a look at them for yourselves. We will make videos that we'll talk about together here very soon. The last thing I'll mention is Bhakti Yoga. So, Bhakti Yoga is union through devotion. So, Liber Astarte is the way to go, and I already have a video on that. But you're picking in Liber Astarte a love deity, and you are going to make yourself fall in love with this deity. You're going to read text about love. You're going to do everything in your daily affairs dedicated to that deity. You're going to do ritual about 3 times a day for that deity. You're going to have an altar in a very special place, the most prominent place that you hold dear in your home or wherever, dedicated an altar there for that deity. And you'll be doing a lot of rituals with that entity. So I chose Bastet when I did it. And by the end, you should really understand the concept of love. And yeah, that's a very beautiful process. There's a video in the description below on Bhakti Yoga and Liber Astarte, as performed by a Thelemite. So these are just some summary base points on where to go from Liber O and Liber E. I think 45 minutes is a long enough video. I hope that this was helpful. I want to pretty much get past Liber O and Liber E at this point. I'm tired of talking about them, if I'm being honest. And I wanted to give some points of what we're going to be talking about in the near future. So a lot of these subjects, I'm going to do Liber Ru. I'm going to do a video on Liber Nu. I'm going to do a video on Liber Had. I have the Mass of the Phoenix. I'm going to do a video on the lesser hexagram ritual and another on the greater hexagram ritual. So stay tuned for all of those. But these were just summaries and some points to help you organize your thoughts if you're new. Focus, do your Liber E, then do your Liber O. I have videos on all of these subjects, from asana, pranayama, physical clairvoyance, the astral light, astral travel, the body of light, you name it. I have these videos already, so hopefully they all help you along in your process, and there's going to be plenty more to come for things that I have not yet made videos on. They're going to be coming, so just stay tuned. Love is the law, love under will. I'll see you on the next one.